am Femi Okay.
And I'm Malika Bilal.
Today, by popular demand, an update on the UK Brexit crisis. Can the United Kingdom come up with a plan for untangling itself from the European Union?
Send us your questions and your comments on Brexit live on Twitter and through our YouTube chat.
I'm Dwayne Toler. I'm a Brexit campaigner and commentator, and you're in the stream.
Thanks once again to our online community for taking part in our Twitter poll to help choose today's topic. 34% of those who voted chose Brexit. We're posting another poll today. You can follow the results at AJ Stream. Help pick next Thursday's topic or tell us what other stories you're interested in on the discussion thread.
So joining us to talk all things Brexit in Bucharest, Romania, Al Jazeera correspondent Lawrence Lee. In Glasgow, Scotland, Peter Gagan, a journalist and investigations editor with Open Democracy. In Oxford, UK, Shaista Aziz, a journalist and councillor for Oxford City Council. And in London, Raphael Baer, he is a political columnist and writer for The Guardian. It's good to see you. I feel like we've brought together a Brexit support group for journalists. Let's start the first segment and the first question with what will happen if the UK leaves the EU without a plan in place? So the UK is set to leave March 29th, but it appears no closer to an agreement on exactly how to handle the trade, immigration and border laws the UK currently follows as an EU member state. On Tuesday, Parliament voted against having a no-deal scenario. Here's British Prime Minister Theresa May.
Last night, the House did vote to reject no deal, but that cannot be the end of the story. The only way, the right honourable gentleman says, of course not. I think that's the first time he's actually accepted that you can't just vote to reject no deal. You have to vote for a deal. Otherwise, you leave with no deal.
So I'm just looking at Lawrence Lee's Twitter profile, and he says, I cover the UK and Europe for Al Jazeera English. Currently trying to explain Brexit to the world. Wish me luck. Lawrence. Options right now.
Well, you see, I've long argued that Brexit won't happen. I call it the circular firing squad argument, because there's at least 5 or 6 different interpretations across the Houses of Parliament as to what you want, from, way off in the extremes of people who want a no deal to all the other end of people who don't want to leave at all. And as you've seen over the course of the months in Parliament, they keep shooting each other and knocking each other down. And so, in the end, I've always thought that Brexit won't happen, because if they kill each other in that sense and each other's plan, then what you're left with is the status quo.
Well,
having said that,
come in there?
You could also argue that it means no deal, couldn't you?
Raphael?
Yeah, I slightly disagree, because what you saw the Prime Minister just say there is absolutely true, that because of laws that have already been passed in the British Parliament, on the 29th of March, the UK legally stops being a member of the European Union. That will happen anyway. So actually, there isn't a default back to the status quo. The sort of situation you fall back on is no deal, which means in practice, the entire legal basis of the UK's trade and its relationship with its European partners that's built up over 30 years literally falls away at sort of 11 p.m. that night.
But would they actually do that? I mean, they don't want no deal, do they? It's kind of economic suicide. If it comes to that, I've always assumed that they'd twitch and say, let's extend and have a second referendum or something else.
So, Lawrence, I like that idea of the let's extending, because I think there are members of our community that think that's probably going to happen as well. But Mete here is not one of those, and he foresees a catastrophe. He says we still have no clarity, and we're nearing the 29th of March with a real possibility of leaving with no deal, which would be catastrophic for future generations. Shocking how we've left it this late. Shaista, I want to give this one to you. Catastrophic. What do you think will happen on the 29th of March?
Well, I agree with Raphael. I think what we're looking at right now is the real potential of a no-deal Brexit, and I think Brexit will happen. I mean, I'm very sad to say that, but I think, Theresa May and the Tories are absolutely adamant they want this to happen. There's been a complete dereliction of duty by the government. They've had almost 3 years to put a plan into place. There is no plan. What's devastating about all of this is it really feels like the UK is in the process of carrying out a massive act of self-harm to the country, and we don't really know what the implications of it will be, because right now, there's lots of scenarios on the table, but the fact of the matter is I think the EU has lost patience with the country and there is no plan. So even if there was supposed to be a Brexit, and if that was, if that was the end outcome, then by now we should be in a place to have a Brexit, but there's nothing there on the table.
Looking at this headline that you wrote, this story that you wrote, Raphael, May thinks she's won, but the reality of Brexit will soon hit her again. What's the reality check?
So, I mean, the other important thing that happens, you showed that clip from Parliament, but the other important thing that happened on that same night is that for the first time in a long time, the Conservative Party mostly got together and actually voted with the Prime Minister and endorsed a sort of deal. Now, the deal that they endorsed is one that doesn't exist. They endorsed sort of her deal, but with all the bits they don't like taken out of it, which is meant to give her a mandate, an instruction to go back to Brussels and say, look, I'm nearly there. I've just got this deal. Just give me this one more thing. But exactly as you just heard from Shahista, in the EU, all the goodwill's gone now. They thought they had a deal. She's reopened it. It's not how you conduct an international negotiation if you want your partners to think you're reliable and trustworthy. So that was really the point I was making, that she's chosen a sort of a warm bath of unity with the Conservative Party over the actual reality of what's available in the negotiated Brexit. But I must say, actually, I think Lawrence made a very important point, that actually no one in that Parliament, very few people in that Parliament actually want the no deal crash out. The problem is it is the default setting if no one can come to a better agreement.
But how amazing, 300 voted for no deal in the vote the other night. I couldn't believe it was so many voted to say, we might be all right. The Cooper amendment, this Labour MP who said, let's make sure that there's no deal, he won by 18 votes or something. It's unbelievable the number of MPs that said, effectively, we're happy with no deal.
Lawrence, what else is unbelievable? The news moves so fast, but I want to rewind just a little bit to when we saw headlines that proclaimed a historic defeat for a sitting government, first time in modern history. And so take us back there, because we have a couple of tweets about that. Mustafa Idris says, is it valid to say that Theresa May is fighting a tougher battle at home than she had with the EU over leading a successful Brexit? Another person writes into us on YouTube. Sanam says, why is she taking this burden? Just let it pass to the next government. And of course, just soon after seeing that historic defeat of the government, she survived narrowly, a no confidence vote. But Peter, I'll bring you in here on this one. Your take on May and this person's comment that this doesn't have to be her burden.
Well, if you look at how she's approached this whole kind of Brexit issue since she became the Prime Minister 2 years ago, she's always said that this is what she's going to do, is deliver Brexit. She lost the general election. It seems unlikely she'd fight another one. This seems to be the kind of, this is her whole kind of political legacy is invested in Brexit. But it's very interesting to note that, okay, she won some sort of battle of unity this week. But as Raphael mentions earlier, she had this huge historic loss, the biggest in history. And this is so unlikely to change now in the coming weeks. So really all she's done is bought herself a couple of weeks of good headlines. But in terms of actually some sort of substantive change, there's no evidence that that's what's going to happen. And if she brings the deal back that she did with the European Union, she can't renegotiate it, it looks like it'll get defeated again. And I think I would kind of echo some of those comments about a no-deal scenario, because while there mightn't be a majority in Parliament for either her deal or for no deal, there's no evidence that there's a majority in Parliament for anything, in which case the United Kingdom just by default leaves the European Union without a deal. And as we get closer to that, we're only, I think, 57 days away from that now. It's quite hard to see what people are going to coalesce around if it's not going to be Theresa May's deal. And the evidence still is that the deal that she brought back from the European Union, which would be substantially the deal she has whenever this process, the next 10 days she comes back from Brussels, it's not clear how that will ever get through the House of Parliament.
For what it's worth, I've spent a bit of time in Parliament the last few days, and I would be cautious about this, but I wouldn't rule out actually there being some kind of incremental grinding movements towards something like her deal. So there are a lot of those very hardline Conservative MPs who are kind of looking for a ladder to climb down with their dignity intact. They don't actually want no deal. Some do, but not all do. There are Labour MPs who are kind of looking to get a bit of a nudge and a wink from the Labour leader to say, go on then, you can cross over and just get this over the line. And actually, you know what? She's a tough lady and she just grinds her opponents down. And I wouldn't be at all surprised if we reach, there might be a bit of an extension to Article 50, but we get to halfway through this year and wow, actually somehow we seem to have left the European Union with a deal that looks an awful lot like the one Theresa May negotiated.
Raphael, I hear you there, and I want to pause us on that note because there is so much to talk about. So I want to move on just a little bit to our next topic of this same show, the movement of goods into the UK. In the event of a no-deal scenario, many Britons are worried about long delays for products entering the country. Supermarkets, pharmaceutical companies, and other businesses are now stockpiling goods to prepare for the worst. So how are others reacting? Take a look at Lawrence Lee's report from last week.
Linda is taking no chances. She bought her Brexit box a few weeks ago. Inside is enough freeze-dried food to last a month. She isn't rich. It cost her £300, nearly $400. But she has no regrets. She supports leaving the European Union as soon as possible. Remain supporters would say, you're a bit crazy, you know, why don't we just stay in the European Union and then you're down to eat packets and tins like this? You think it's the price we're paying in that sense?
I can see what they're saying that, and I can understand why Remainers want to remain. But I'm looking more long term. I want democracy back for my children and grandchildren. I don't want to go down the route that it looks like where we're being dictated to.
She's not the only one with concerns. Pretty Hat on Twitter writes in my case, I'm worried about the supply of medicine for a chronic health condition. This person goes on to say, I've stockpiled a small amount. Main impact is my local doctors have now reduced prescription from usual 3 months to 2 months. Coincidentally, just happens to be at the same time as Brexit. So Lawrence, take us through what some people are doing in fears of running out of supplies.
Well, no, you see, the thing is, I mean, you know, people who support Brexit have gone since the referendum from saying it'll make the country richer, which is unprovable because it hasn't happened yet, to now they're saying, well, a bit of suffering, you know, will do us all good. I mean, there was a guy who wrote a column, you know, a very old right-wing guy, wrote a column in a right-wing magazine the last couple of days saying when he was young, you know, the boats used to go over and steal food from France. And he said, you know, we could go and do the same again, and it would all be quite exciting. It's a sort of, you know, a glorification of victimhood almost. That you know, people are celebrating the fact that life might be difficult. You know, it's like they want to be back in the Second World War or something. You know, I think it's beyond any doubt that there will be problems certainly for a couple of months, and supermarkets can't stock in you know, enough food to last more than a week or so. So there will be problems. It depends if you think it's worth it.
It's really ironic that Linda was stocking up on chicken tikka masala there in those big. Those barrels things. I mean, you couldn't make this up. I mean, this is the state of, you know, where we are with Brexit. I mean, you know, I think it's absolutely shocking that there's people who are hoarding medicines because they fear, you know, if they've got diabetes and things like that, they're really worried that they don't have enough insulin. I mean, what kind of normal functioning country in modern day, you know, what kind of country does that to itself? I mean, you know, while this whole Brexit horror show has been rambling on, we must remember that the UK is suffering from, you know, massive crisis of austerity. The homelessness crisis alone is off the scale. Today there's been a report that's come out in relation to mass overcrowding of housing. You know, people are suffering hugely. And the fact that some people think, you know, that people need to suffer even more, I think is just absolutely outrageous. And let's make this very clear. It's the poorest people who will suffer the most, and it's the poorest people who will be victimized the most. For everyone else, this is a game, and it's a disgrace.
Peter, people may not know what may or may not happen with a no deal or a deal as the UK comes out of Brexit, but you certainly know the impact on the economy right now and for the last 2.5 years. What's been happening?
Well, if you look at it, I think it's fair to say, you know, there hasn't been, because we've not left the European Union yet. It's quite unclear exactly what will happen with it, but definitely growth has slowed in the United Kingdom over the last couple of years. It's not quite as bad as some of the other Eurozone nations, but we have seen a slowing of growth. And there does seem to be plenty of economists who suggest that, like, well, if the Brexit vote hadn't happened, we wouldn't have seen quite the same slowing of the economy, because actually quite a lot of the problems in the Eurozone, especially say around still the Euro, or actually don't really affect Britain because Britain's not in the Euro. It's always they're not. Yeah, and I think it's not really.
So I do think it's very important. That's absolutely right. But the fact that actually things haven't been, there hasn't been a sort of sudden cliff edge problem for the economy, has sort of fed this understanding among a lot of people who supported leave in the first place that actually the warnings about what a bad idea Brexit would be were this sort of, what they call it, Project Fear, was this sort of terrible myth-making about how awful everything would be. And the problem is now that we're making sort of, those of us who think Brexit isn't a great idea, and certainly a no-deal Brexit would be a terrible idea, are warning again. And these are now very, very credible warnings from very serious people about quite what an appalling thing it would be to sort of impose this economic blockade on yourself as a country. Those warnings are falling on deaf ears, and a lot of people just think it's another round of Project Fear. And there's actually an extraordinary amount of complacency, I think, about what the economic impact of a no-deal Brexit would be, because the economic impact of the referendum result itself was actually very muted.
And I think that's also fed into the wider kind of idea about what could actually happen, and I think as well, a lot of people, the people like Lauren spoke to there, have actually kind of politically they feel like, okay, this might be something that's worth suffering. It might seem like a really strange, there's something, there's almost like a psychological trauma going on here, because there's a kind of narrative of suffering that, like, this is something that Britain might have to do to kind of cleanse itself of the European Union.
So let me just show you this.
Who kind of agree with that.
Sure, I'm just going to show you this on my laptop. It's brexitprepping.com. We heard what Linda was doing there. You can actually then decide how much shopping you need to do. I'm a little concerned. I'm pretty worried. I'm probably panicking. Let me just click that box, and then you have a list of produce that you need to buy for the next 3 months that will get you through Brexit. I know, Lawrence, that you were hesitating, calling Linda crazy, or Remainers might say that you are crazy. Are you seeing any Brexit voters' remorse right now because there's no deal?
Well, I mean, I think it depends. There's different sorts of Brexit, aren't there? Across the country, certainly according to all the polling I've seen, the number of people who want a no-deal Brexit is really a big minority. And I think one of the things to remember as well, and this is just a fact, not an opinion, is that when the referendum happened, all this talk about the customs union and the arcane details of all that stuff was hardly mentioned at all during the referendum. And when it was confused with the single market, which is something else. Yeah. And it was all about immigration, really, and taking our laws back and stuff like that. And suddenly it's all about the customs union. And that's just become a completely new thing that wasn't part of the referendum conversation at all.
And such a big issue right now, the Irish border. Part of the argument for Brexit was to end open borders, but once the UK leaves the EU, what will actually happen to the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland? Will any changes be to the current open border upset that hard-won peace that's actually enshrined by the 1998 Good Friday Agreement? So I want you to have a listen to the European Commission President, Jean-Claude Juncker, what he said to European Parliament on Wednesday.
Both sides have said loud and clear that there can be no return to a hard border on the island of Ireland. No slipping back into darker times past. Some hope that the 26 other countries will abandon the backstop, and so Ireland at the last minute. But this is not a game, and neither is it a simple bilateral issue. It goes to the heart of what being a member of the European Union means. Ireland's border is Europe's border, and it is our union's priority.
Peter, you grew up on the Irish border, and we can't have this conversation without a phrase that I'm seeing in a lot of our tweets. Take a look at this one here from H.G. Flores, who says, the biggest obstacles are the Irish backstop and freedom of movement. So explain to our international audience the Irish backstop.
Oh, good luck.
Well, it's interesting. I think a lot of people might assume that freedom, yeah, exactly. It's not an easy one to do. Really, essentially, what the Irish backstop is all about is that once the United Kingdom leaves the European Union, the Republic of Ireland will stay in it, and after that, there will be a different regulatory system in the United Kingdom, which includes Northern Ireland and in the Irish Republic, which means that on the border, there will be a need for customs checks. The backstop is this arrangement which was agreed between the United Kingdom and the European Union, which means that if there can't be another solution found, a wider trade deal or a technological solution, that essentially the whole of the United Kingdom will remain in alliance with the European Union. So it's allowed to allow for the free movement of goods across the Irish border. And it's become such a contentious thing because if that happens, the United Kingdom can't sign trade deals, which, to be honest, was not part of much of the rhetoric of the referendum. Very few people during the referendum were talking about trade deals. That's now become a big thing, that apparently if there's trade deals, that's going to be a disaster if we can't have independent trade deals. And so the Irish backstop is that's what's designed to do, is to allow what's basically been the last 25 years of life in the Irish border, which is frictionless trade, but also frictionless travel. People live and work across the Irish border. Many people live on one side of the border and work on the other, go to school on one side and vice versa. And it's designed to not change that, so there'll be no physical infrastructure on the border.
You know, this whole Irish border issue, for me, reminds me very much of the fact that I think a lot of Brexiteers think that they're still living in the days of the empire, when they can get a crayon and a pencil and draw borders and decide, you know, which part of the world belongs to this country. And I mean, you know, anyone who'd done their homework in the run up to Brexit should have known that this issue of the Irish border was going to come up. And again, you know, one more time, you know, for those at the back, you know, it's like if we were going to go for Brexit as a country, by now, all of these issues should have been ironed out. And instead, we've had 3 years of absurd theatrics going on in Parliament. And I think a lot of people have switched off at a time when they need to be switched on, because we're in the final weeks now of potentially, you know, one of the worst disasters to affect this country. And people have, you know, the general public have had enough because they've kind of run out of patience with the leaders of the country, and indeed a lot of politicians.
Raphael, I know you want to get in here. I want to direct this to you. Douglas here was also worried about contradicting the Good Friday Agreement. Douglas says, hints the difficulties we're in now. The only way to avoid this hard border is for the UK to stay in the ECU, European Customs Union, which many then don't want. Raphael?
Yeah, and that's the point I think Peter made very well, which is that ultimately the way you keep a border invisible is to have total alignment of all the some rules and regulations for goods crossing that border, and that will do something that a lot of the sort of very most fanatical Brexiters reject, because it changes the entitlement of the UK government to sign trade deals with other countries. But the very important thing to understand beneath this is that the Good Friday Agreement, which brought to an end, you know, a generation of very brutal, violent, essentially civil war within a community. The only reason that agreement is able to function so well is because both the Republic of Ireland and the United Kingdom were members of the European Union. The EU is itself corporately as a signatory to the Good Friday Agreement, together with Dublin and London. And so, and it was never really explained properly or fully understood in the 2016 referendum campaign, the enormous danger of taking one country, taking one signatory of that deal out of that agreement, and therefore what that actually meant properly to the place where that agreement was signed. And the Leavers and the Brexiteers literally denied that was a problem, and that was spectacularly dangerous.
Yeah, and the thing is, just to follow on that, you know, people say a hard border would jeopardise the peace without explaining why. I mean, I interviewed a guy on the border who's a taxi driver now, but he was 20 years in jail with the IRA. And I said to him, what happens if you put a customs post there? Because the UK's just shut itself off properly from the European Union. And he said, that hill there, they'll shoot at the customs post from that hill. You know, that's what it means, because it's just a red rag. It's dividing Ireland all over again. See, that's the contradiction with Brexit. You can't leave the European Union entirely without putting a border up, but you can't put a border up, you know, because it breaches the Good Friday Agreement and breaches the peace. That's why it won't work.
It's so chilling when you say that. We were both in the middle of the UK, in the Midlands, many years ago, and when I went there to university, there was still the memory of the IRA bombing and over the UK, and the idea that we would even go back to anything that's like that is very chilling for anybody in the UK who remembers that time back in the 1970s. Malika?
But they'll just blame the Irish.
It's really chilling. It's a very chilling thing to say. We brought this show to you because we asked you for a poll, and we gave you these options as the poll, and this show was brought to you by you because you asked for it. Andrew Simpson's Linus says, I'm English, can we have something other than Brexit? Getting bored now. March the 29th, Andrew, sorry about that. Meanwhile, Malika.
Slightly similar sentiment on YouTube. Mark Henry says, what a mess. Very simple there, you can see. Enjoying the conversation as well with your own thoughts. #AJString.